had quite a busy year with webinars and seminars and user conferences, and hopefully you've been able to attend more than this webinar. I know that we have quite a few still left for the 2017 year, and hopefully some of those will be very encouraging for you and fill in some gaps for you. Let's go over some logistics before we get started. This is being recorded, and you should be receiving an email in the next day or two with a link to the recording. That's for your own benefit if you want to come back and look at some information, if you actually want to share the recording with someone else that wasn't able to attend, any of those things. Also, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, there is a team behind me working with me on this. They won't be heard, but certainly they will be fielding all of your questions. So please use the GoToWebinar Q&A panel, and they should be answering your questions as you go through. So you don't have to wait till the end to get that. If for some reason we don't get to your question before the end of the webinar, we will be emailing you with an answer, but usually we're able to get to all the questions as we go through. As far as who I am, my name is Derek Melber, and I am the technical evangelist for the AD Solutions team here at ManageEngine. And really what that means is I get an opportunity to travel the world, meeting administrators, talking with organizations. Really the goal is for me to try to solve problems around Active Directory, group policy, security, anything in that area. And what we've been doing in 2017 is really trying to focus on security as the forefront, but also other aspects of Active Directory, such as provisioning users, automations, automating reports. We've been dealing with GDPR and compliance. So we've tried to deal with a lot of different things. Along the way, what we've tried to do is also provide you with resources, free resources that you can actually take advantage of. So if you go to our website here, and I want to point you to some resources that you can utilize after the time we have together. We don't have a lot of time together today in the webinar, but certainly I want to give you some resources that you could take advantage of. If you come to our main landing page, ManageEngine.com, hover over support, you'll see that we have some blogs. And these blogs are things that we're writing multiple blogs a week now. And if you just come in and search on something, let's say you search on Active Directory, you can actually just get the blogs that are related to Active Directory. For example, if you wanted to come in and you wanted to look at information about passwords. So let's say that you come in and you look up passwords like we're going to be talking about today. We've actually written quite a few blogs on passwords related to how to secure them, different things on how to do things. We have videos, we have blogs. It's really for you, this particular blog. So please come take advantage of it. It's easy to get around. And as you will see, we try to keep the length of the blog something that is reasonable for you. We don't want to take up too much of your time, but certainly we want to try to get you solutions. Another resource I want to point you to is if you hover over products instead of support, in the lower left-hand corner, we have a security hardening site. Now, this site was built really for two reasons. One is Microsoft was talking about some security technologies for Active Directory starting about 4 years ago, and we felt that we wanted to tell you about these security technologies, but also give you an alternative to them. The Microsoft technologies are called JIT and GIA. And if you've never heard of them, I'm going to suggest you go watch this video. It's actually a demonstration from Microsoft of these technologies. And it's very enlightening to see where Microsoft is going with security within Active Directory and what they're providing for you. Also, the second reason that we built the site was we wanted to give you a decoder ring on how to secure your Active Directory environment. So what we have done is we've broken out the critical aspects of security within Active Directory and also your Windows servers, and we've given you these blogs and videos that will walk you through on how to actually secure your environment. I challenge all administrators, especially this time of year when things slow down a little bit due to holidays and people taking vacation time and the IT staff really having less responsibilities, is go through these things. I think that by January 1, if you start now, working through these concepts, you could actually get Active Directory more secure. And if you follow the direction that I give you, by January 1, you can actually have notifications coming into your inbox anytime that any critical security configuration changes within Active Directory. So if you want some more information on that, email me. That is the other resource that I want to point you to here, which is my email address. And all of us on the AD Solutions team love to get emails. The primary reason is it allows us to learn some new things. But the secondary reason is hopefully we can actually help solve the problem that you have when you send us emails. So if you have any direction that you want on Active Directory security, group policy, how to use them together to secure your environment, please email us and we'd be more than happy to send that your way. Now, another resource that I want to send you to, also available on many different places within our website, is our brand new Securing Privileged Access in Active Directory book. It's a small little read. It's actually kind of a fun little read. It's in the dummies format, and it's just a great resource for you to read through, maybe get some tips, and certainly share it with others. So you can download the free PDF and you can share it with others in your organization. And I really think it's an excellent resource for you to take advantage of. So come download it, see what it does for you, and see if you can actually get some leverage with others within your organization to help you secure Active Directory. Finally, I want to talk about our world tour. We actually have completed our 2017 world tour, and we're diligently working on the 2018 world tour. This year we went to about 20 different countries. Our team continues to grow, and our presentation team, and what we're trying to do with these world tours. For those of you that haven't had the opportunity to attend a seminar from our world tour, I encourage you, please check us out in 2018. We're going to have some amazing information that we can share with you. And these seminars are not about product. These seminars are all about solutions. I can send you comment after comment after comment about people that have attended and said this was absolutely worth our time. They're only a half a day long, and the amount of information that you can get and take back to your office and use immediately is invaluable. So please check us out in 2018, not only for our seminars, but our webinars and our user conferences. So with that said, let's move on and talk about passwords. Now, what I want to do today is I want to start from foundational concepts, and I want to move into more complex ideas. And the reason I want to do that is, first of all, being an Active Directory and group policy MVP for about 16 years, I still find administrators and organizations not fully understanding password policies. So I want to make sure that by the time we're done with this webinar, you fully understand password policies, how they work, what's possible, how to report, and what the limitations are. And then we'll talk about some password attack strategies. Because my view on this is if we understand what password policies can do and what they can't do, and how attacks fit into that, we then can make steps on how to fill those gaps and where Microsoft doesn't help us with password policies, so we can reduce the attack surface. That's really the goal. So let's talk about the default password policy. Now, when I say default password policy, I'm talking about group policy, because that in Active Directory is how Microsoft has pushed out the default password policy. Now, within Active Directory and group policy, you can go into the default domain policy and you can look at the default password policy configuration. Now, let's actually jump into the interface and let me show you what this looks like. So if I come in here to my domain controller and I go to group policy management, and then I come here to the default domain policy, I can right click, edit. I can go under policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy. Now this right here is what defines our password policy by default. Now, let's talk about reporting. Now, reporting, I want to talk about it in a couple of different ways. One is, as an administrator, you are responsible for ensuring that your configurations are correct. For some of you, because this is primarily targeting Europe, you are soon going to be under GDPR. GDPR is going to have audits. Now, as I toured the second half of the World Tour in 2017, I asked many administrators in Europe, how many of you had to deal with audits at this point? And I got about 20%. I think that's the high end. So that means that 80% of administrators working in Europe today have never had to deal with an audit or an auditor. Well, guess what? The way these audits work is someone from a corporation, let's say PwC or Deloitte or who knows what, KPMG, are going to come in and they're going to ask you for reports. One of the reports they're going to ask you for is the password policy. Now, let me describe for you the correct way to get a report for the password policy. This that I'm showing you right now on the screen is not it, okay? This information right here doesn't tell me anything about the current password policy. This is the default, but it may not actually be what's in place now. The correct way to report on the current password policy is to go down to your command prompt or start search here and type in secpol.msc. Now, this secpol is a pre-installed tool on every domain control, actually every Windows machine. And if you come here, you'll see that it has the ability to look at your password policy. Now, if I show you the settings for the default domain password policy in comparison to this password policy, you will see that there is a vast difference. So this is what is currently in place down in the lower right-hand corner. And in the middle of the screen is what I find most administrators actually report on for the password policy. As you can see, it doesn't always have to exist in the default domain policy. Now, it doesn't matter at this point because we're just reporting on where it's coming from. The key is that we run the correct report. So to get the correct report of the default password policy or the current password policy, you run secpol.msc. Excellent. All right, so now let's understand some other logistics with regard to the password policy that can be configured with group policy. How many password policies can you have in a single domain? Now, before you answer, let's again walk through a different task. So I'm going to come in here, first of all, to Active Directory users in computers. Now, when I launch Active Directory users in computers, you're going to see that I have not a very huge environment, but certainly I have quite a few organizational units like you probably have. And if I come in here, you will see that I have some different OUs primarily named after, let's say, for example, I have different departments. Now, let's say that I want finance, because they deal with financial information, to have a more stringent password policy than the rest of the organization. Now, if I come in here to group policy, I could come down here to finance, and you'll see here that I have a finance password policy. Now, if I go into the finance password policy and I configure the password policy settings, and let's say that I come in here and give it a minimum password length. And let's say that because it's finance, I want to have users putting in a 14-character password as a minimum. So my question to you is, now that I have a group policy object, finance, password policy, linked to the finance OU, and here inside of Active Directory, I have all these users in the finance OU. If Bert were to reset his password at this point, what would be Bert's minimum password length? Now, some of you are saying it's going to be 14. Others are going to say that it's probably 7, and others are saying that it's 0. Now, what's the right answer? Well, first of all, let's tell you what the correct answer is. With group policy, the way that you determine what the current password policy is, because I just showed you how to do this, is secpol.msc. This tells you what every user in Active Directory, what their current password policy is, if you're using only group policy, because group policy can only have one password policy for all users in the entire domain. That's right. Now, let's go back to this idea of group policy and define or describe why this doesn't work. Well, let's go back into this policy, this finance password policy, and let's go to the password policy settings again. Now, right here is where I configured 14 characters. But my question to you is the password policy a computer-based setting or a user-based setting? Makes you think about it, right? Now, if we go up the path here, you will see that the password policy is a computer-based setting. User configurations are down here. The password policy is here under computer. So all users in Active Directory under an OU will not receive password policy settings. That's correct. They have to adhere to the password policy for the computer where their account is located, but the password policy is not a user setting. It is a computer-based setting. It is a filter on the database of users that is stored on that computer. So when you're looking at policy, group policy-based settings, you can only have one password policy when using group policy. Well, if you link a GPO to the domain controller's OU, again, it's a computer-based setting, and you cannot have multiple. Why? It's just the design of group policy. One only. So by default, in Active Directory, the way it works is that you must link the GPO containing your password policy to the domain node, and you can only have one password policy for the entire domain of users. So we have some significant limitations here when it comes to the password policy. Now, not just focusing on the password policy in terms of, in general, how many, let's talk about some of the details to increase the security of the password policy. So let's go back and look at the settings that are in a password policy. So here I have my password policy, and actually let's launch SecPol again. And let's go in and look. Now, you'll see that I have these settings here. My question to you is there any way that Microsoft gives you to increase these controls? Because when we start looking at the overall landscape of password attacks, we're missing quite a few things here. Well, the reality is Microsoft doesn't give us any mechanism to increase the security of the password policy. What you see is what you get. Now, can you write your own filter? Yes, but that's not using Microsoft technology. That's just using your own way to kind of hack this system to make it work for you. Microsoft doesn't have a way to increase this. Even if you're using the glorious PowerShell, it doesn't help you with this whatsoever. So we have some significant limitations when we start talking about the controls of our password policy. But can I have multiple password policies in the same domain? That's a different question that I asked before. Before I asked how many password policies can I have using group policy? The answer to that is one. But if I use fine-grained password policies, how many can I have? Well, now that's a totally different situation. But keep in mind, fine-grained password policies are not configured in group policy. They're not configured by default. And you don't use the group policy management console because they're not group policy to administer them. If you want to configure fine-grained password policies, you're going to have to come in and use adsedit.msc. Now, Microsoft does have a GUI for this, but you have to have the latest and greatest operating system and the new administration panel for it. Without that, you have to come in here to System, and then under System, go to Password Settings Container, and you can configure a fine-grained password policy. Now, these fine-grained password policies are created by you going in and creating a new object. But in the end, it's the same set of controls that you had in the password policy using group policy. So what's the major difference? Well, let's go back to our set of questions. How many password policies can you have in a single domain using fine-grained password policies? I've never seen an upper limit. So now we can have multiple. Why would you want multiple? Well, I want my administrators to have the most stringent password policy. Maybe they're going to have 20-character passwords. I want HR and finance to have more stringent password policies than everyone else because they're accessing critical information. Most users can probably have, 7, 10 password length. But when we really look at it, I think they need to have over 14. Because we need to defend against attacks that are occurring with our passwords. Now, we'll talk about attacks soon and the limitations that Microsoft has for controlling attacks and what the attackers are actually attacking us. So how, if we use fine-grained password policies, are they applied to users? Well, fine-grained password policies are applied to users through group membership, okay? So there is a attribute of the object that you create for the fine-grained password policy that you're going to have to go in and set. So that means that if I have multiple fine-grained password policies and I have users as part of multiple groups that are configured to have access to the fine-grained password policy, how in the world do I determine what the end user has? It's a very good question. Again, GDPR auditors are going to be asking you for this. How do you report on that? Well, I can tell you right now, Microsoft doesn't have a tool for this. They don't. You can't use ADC Edit. You can't use Group Policy Management Console. You can't use any of these things. So what are you going to do? Well, let me show you a tool here. There are some tools that are designed to actually report on current configurations. AD Manager Plus is one of them. If I come in here under AD Reports and I go to All Users, I can generate a report on all users, and I can then go in and add in something called PSO applied. Now, the PSO stands for Password Setting Object, and it can report for me which password policy the user has. If it is a dash, that means there's no PSO applied, which means, that's right, the group policy object is in control. So this is a tool that per user, you can actually determine which password policy each user has. This is what you need for generating reports, okay? But as I mentioned earlier, using fine-grained password policies don't give you any controls over what you had with the password policy and group policy. Well, why is this important? Well, we have passwords that are being attacked today. We have so many different ways that people are attacking passwords. We need to defend against them. Now, let's jump in and take a look at a tool that many attackers use. The tool that I'm going to show you is Kane. Now, Kane is a password attack tool. It actually is more than that, but this is the primary use. Now, I can go in and I can sniff the network. I can also get a listing of all users and their password hashes. Because I have the password hash, now I can do attacks on those hashes. The first one on the list is a dictionary attack. Now, what's a dictionary attack? A dictionary attack is basically the attacker created or somehow achieved by downloading and then consolidating a dictionary that's full of passwords that they want to attack against. This is not the Webster's dictionary. This is an attack dictionary. So what the attackers do is they go in and they add it in, and then they start attacking your hashes, trying to determine what the password is. Now, this is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to do a brute force attack. Now, when you start looking at brute force attacks, this is basically the idea that you are creating a structure for the password that you're going to attack. So you put in a minimum length, a maximum length, and then you put in the character space. Now, when we start looking at the overall picture of passwords, the attackers are taking advantage of what most people use. Now, let's start putting some things together here. Now, if I go back into the password policy, so I'm going to come back here to the password policy setting options. You will notice that I have these settings, and then one of the settings is called complexity. Well, what does complexity mean? Well, if we go and look at the actual settings here under my password policy complexity, you will see that it explains that you must have 3 of the 4 categories of lowercase, uppercase, number, and special. Well, what of these 3 of 4 character types are users going to use? Well, I find that administrators around the world say they're going to use uppercase, lowercase, and number. So if the attacker knows that your users are only using uppercase, lowercase, and number, when it comes to the character space here, what are they going to choose? Are they going to choose anything with special? No. And why does that matter? Well, because if they don't choose additional characters, it's going to reduce the time that it takes to crack your passwords. Make sense? So what we need to do is we need to look at how these attackers are breaking in. Dictionaries, brute force, taking advantage of no special characters. Then they're using rainbow tables to break into us. So beyond this, what else are they doing? Well, the attackers are also using technology such as pass the hash and pass the ticket to break into our passwords. So we need to defend against these attack technologies. How do we do that? Well, let's start at the top of the list. A dictionary attack. How do we defend against a dictionary attack? Well, I think it's pretty easy. If we include the dictionary as a limitation for what users can use in their password, a dictionary attack is 100% thwarted. They can't now attack us because any dictionary is worthless. A brute force attack. Well, with a brute force attack, a couple of things. One is, let's start using special characters. Force your users to use special characters. 2, the most important aspect of a password is length. The most important aspect of a password is length. It is not complexity. It is not using multiple characters. So we need to have technologies in place to force users to use special characters and to increase the password above 15 characters. Now, why 15? Let's go back in and let me show you. I'm going to come in here to group policy, and I'm going to go into the default domain policy. And what I would like to do is I would like to force users using Microsoft technology to use a password length greater than 14. So I'm going to suggest 22. Now watch what happens when I put in 22. Watch what happens when I put in 33, 32, 31, right? It defaults to 14. Why? Well, Microsoft, back in the olden days, Windows for Workgroups days, created an authentication protocol called LAN Manager, and then in Windows NT3 called it NT LAN Manager. LAN Manager has a limitation of 14 characters. So Microsoft is still forcing us to use 14 character maximum passwords. Why? Because they don't want to break your environment. Well, that sounds good on the surface, but I want to break hacking tools. Look at this, LAN Manager hash right there. If I put in a password greater than 14 characters, this becomes worthless. Do you notice right here, look at all of these hashes. Do you think all those passwords are the same? No, they are null because the password is greater than 14 characters. Okay? I must break LAN Manager because if I can break LAN Manager, I'm now helping reduce pass the hash attacks. I'm helping. I'm not completely denying it. How do you reduce pass the hash? Well, here's my suggestion. You're going to go to www.microsoft.com/PTH And there Microsoft has some excellent white papers on how you can reduce the effectiveness of pass the hash. I also have written multiple blogs about that on how to reduce pass the hash. They're taken from the white paper, giving you bits and pieces of it. So you can go to the blog and you can go to the Microsoft website. But we need to put in place these additional technologies. Unfortunately, Microsoft can't do it. But that's where we come in. We did it. Not only did we do it, we did it with great ease, giving you the power that you need to secure your passwords. It's in a tool called AD SelfService Plus. AD SelfService Plus gives you an option to configure password policy enforcement. We can force special characters. We can add in dictionaries. We can force password length greater than 14. We now have a tool that integrates with what you currently have, and we are increasing the password restrictions. The password policy enforcement, actually everything in AD SelfService Plus, is policy-based. Now, these are AD SelfService Plus policies, which mean I can have multiple. So I can have different users in the organization have different requirements for their passwords. Also, some amazing technologies on top of this enforcement. When your users today go and they want to change their password, right? So let's log in as Tom. If Tom wants to change his password, Tom hits Control-Delete, change password, and Tom normally doesn't know what the password requirements are. Look here, I'm displaying for Tom the password requirements. I now am communicating with the end user to help them with their password requirements, and I've increased it. This is some powerful stuff. Also, with regard to the password enforcement, what I don't want is I don't want the administrator to be able to go in and modify the user's password. So what we have done is we have actually built into the technology. If an administrator goes in and resets the password for a user in Active Directory users' computers, even the administrator resetting the password must meet the requirements that are set forth in the enforcement for that user. So we thought of everything. We now give you a solution that allows you to increase password policy requirements for your users in a customized way completely. And you are communicating with your end user so that your end users know what the requirements are. This is a great way for you to now defend against tools such as Kane, that these tools are going in and they are really wreaking havoc inside of your organization. Now, I do want to point you to one more resource. I want you to go back to our main website, manageengine.com. Hover over products and go to AD SelfService Plus. Earlier this year, in February, I wrote a white paper for AD SelfService Plus on password hacking. Inside of this white paper, which is only about 7 pages long, you get some amazing information and insight on how to secure passwords. There's also a link to another white paper which talks about a company that created a server to hack into passwords like no other. I encourage you to read both of these white papers. Then download AD SelfService Plus, implement the technologies so that you can increase security of your organization to reduce the effectiveness on how people are hacking into passwords. Because you need to have something that is going to help you increase security of your passwords. This is a tool that does that. It enforces it through the GNUT. It enforces it through administrators changing it. So in this short webinar, I've shown you the limitations of the Microsoft password policies. I've shown you how to report on them. I've shown you how attackers are attacking our passwords in different ways. I've given you resources on how to secure your environment, and I've given you a solution on how to increase the password policy to defend against these attacks, which is AD SelfService Plus. So please, go download AD SelfService Plus, install it, configure it. Within 15 minutes, you can easily increase the password policy in your organization without having to do anything to Active Directory. This just lays on top of what you currently have. So we've gone through a lot in this short time. That is my email address. If you do have any follow-up emails, please contact me. Ask me questions. Ask the events team at AD Solutions. All of us are more than happy to help you try to get you a better solution for your passwords. When you come to GDPR in May of 2018, you're going to have to deal with some of these things. My suggestion is you take care of it right now, so by May, you're ready to go. So that concludes our webinar for today. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank my colleagues for answering your questions as we went through. I know your time is valuable, and myself and everyone in the AD Solutions team thanks you for your time and your dedication to make your organization better. So with that, I'm going to let you get back to your day. Again, keep an eye out for that, that email with a link to this recording. And I want to thank you for your time. If I don't see you in 2017, hopefully I see you in an event in 2018 and continued webinars.